Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be the I Dare You book tag. I was tagged by both Waiting Moose and Shannon from Planet Shannon, and I'll link both of their videos below. This is the tag that the first time I saw it I thought it was hilarious because it has a rule of you have to be honest. Unlike all those other tags where you're being dishonest all the time, I guess. Question number 1 is what book has been on your shelf the longest? And this is the question that you always answer with a childhood book. I am not sure which one of these is the correct answer. These are both books that I have had since I was a kid. This is The Sorcerer's Scrapbook by Michael Berenstain. And then this is Les Plus Beaux Récits Merveilleux, which is various children's bedtime stories from different countries. And question number 2 is what is your current read, your last read, and the book that you will read next? I am currently reading Thomas Keanley's The Daughters of Mars, which is about a pair of sisters who are Australian nurses during the First World War in Egypt. The last book that I read was the Mass Effect tie-in Nexus Uprising, and the book that I'm going to read next, I don't know. The book that I'm going to read next is going to be trying to finish Gardens of the Moon, which I've been putting off because I haven't been enjoying it. But question number 3 is what book did everyone like that you hated? I had to read Angels and Demons, the Dan Brown book, for a book club. And I mean, I had to. I read it because I was in this book club, so I felt that I ought to finish it. And I really did not enjoy that. And that was popular enough that it got made into a movie, so there you go. Question number 4 is what book do you keep telling yourself you're going to read but you probably won't? My answer to that is this, Legacy of Bitterness by Alberto Spacci, which is a history of Ethiopia and fascist Italy, 1935 to 1941. I have owned this book for years now. It has moved with me several times. I don't think I'm ever going to read this. I don't know why I bought this in the first place. I mean, it might be an interesting history. I'm not particularly a Second World War buff. I'm not particularly into Ethiopian or Italian history, so I'm not really sure why I bought this in the first place. But I don't know, maybe I will read it. Who knows? Question number 5 is what book are you saving for retirement? I'm not really saving anything for retirement because, you hope that you're going to be able to retire someday, but who knows? You might get hit by a bus. Question number 6 is last page. Read it first or wait till the end? Wait till the end, generally? I mean, the exception is obviously if by the last page you mean the index and I'm reading something that is not a narrative book, like if I'm reading nonfiction and I'm looking for a particular fact, then yeah, I would go to the index at the back first. So, but I don't think that's what the question is really asking. Question number 7, acknowledgements. Waste of paper and ink or an interesting aside? I don't know why anyone would call that a waste of paper and ink. That's kind of like, it's like when you watch awards shows and people complain about the boring awards for cinematography or something. I'm like, no. People deserve to thank their loved ones. And so, I mean, sometimes the acknowledgements are interesting, but even if it's just, thanks to my wife and my editor and whoever, great, their wife and their editor and their dog deserve their thanks. So, I don't know why you'd call that a waste, even if you don't read them. Question number 8 is which book character would you trade places with? Is there a book character that you'd want to trade places with? Probably not. I always say if I were a superhero, the superhero whose powers I would want to have is the Midnighters. Because his powers basically amount to he can't die and he can't lose a fight, which seemed like that would be useful to have. But, I mean, of course, being a superhero, there's lots of drama, and who wants drama? So not really. Question number 9 is, do you have a book that reminds you of something specific in your life? The Black Stallion and the Girl, which is one of Walter Farley's Black Stallion books, always reminds me of driving with my family from Disentis in Switzerland to Kanaka in Belgium, because I was reading this book on this trip as we were driving through the mountains, and I could only read bits of it because it's, winding and you start to get a little car sick, and I don't know, I was like 10 years old at the time, but yes, that book is always makes me think of that drive. Question number 10 is name a book that you acquired in an interesting way. I don't know that I've ever acquired a book in an interesting way. I always think the most interesting way that I've acquired books is sometimes I go to antique shops and they're not necessarily shops that have a book section, but sometimes they'll have a few books somewhere, and sometimes those are a lot of fun to pick up. And I know I've picked up a lot of First World War memoirs that were published back in the 20s, that way. Books that aren't in print anymore. And they're always a surprise because, you know, you're looking for an antique table and you find some books. Question number 11 is, have you ever given a book away for a special reason to a special person? I don't know that it's really a special reason to a special person, but I have given this book, This Alien Shore, to a lot of people. I read this for the first time when it was new. I was in university at the time, and it just blew me away in terms of both being kind of a classic space opera, but also having an appeal to broader issues in an almost literary way, and in a way that I think appeals to people who think they don't like science fiction. So I definitely gave this to virtually all of my friends in that year. I don't know if that's special enough, but that's the story I'll go with. Question number 12 is, what book has been with you the most places? I think the correct answer is actually a pair of books, and they are Picklehead and One Night at the Call Center. I bought both of these in Chennai. Actually, weirdly, the bookmark is still here. And it was the Landmark in Spencer Plaza. This one was 95 rupees, and this was 392, because I think it's the UK edition, because I obviously used this as the bookmark. Anyway, so these went with me from Chennai to Brussels to Toronto to Calgary to Burlington to Washington, D.C. to Houston. So they've been a lot of places with me. Question number 13 is, any required reading that you hated in high school that wasn't so bad 2 years later? I don't think I hated anything that I had to read in high school. I read really quickly, so a lot of the stuff that I read in high school I got tired of because we would read bits of it in class, and because a lot of the books that we were reading were fairly short ones, I frequently would read the book every day or every other day, because our classes were, 73 minutes long, so if you've got a book that's under 150 pages, clearly I wasn't paying attention if I was rereading them each time. But yeah, I can't think of any that I really didn't like, so I don't have an answer to that. Question number 14 is, used or brand new? And I think there's a charm to having secondhand books, and I love secondhand book shopping, but yeah, there's a certain laziness to buying brand new books, especially since everything's available online and there's so many discounted sites now, so I don't have a strong preference either way. But question number 15 is, have you ever read a Dan Brown book? And I answered that because the book that I hated that everyone loved was Angels and Demons. In addition to that, I've also read The Da Vinci Code, because when that was at its sort of peak popularity, my boss at the time was a huge fan. She was like, it's all true, and I was like, I'm pretty sure it's not, so I read her copy. I really did not enjoy that. I spent a lot of time complaining about it, and in a later job, I complained to my boss about the fact that this old boss had loved that book. And so as a joke, he gave me the Da Vinci Code, which is a parody. So, question number 16 is, have you ever seen a movie that you liked more than the book? I think The Hunt for Red October and Patriot Games are both better than the books. I was a huge fan of a lot of those early Tom Clancy books when I was younger. But even when I was like 13, I could tell that the movies were better than the books, because, I mean, he wrote some good action, some good suspense, but the dialogue is not good. And I remember a friend of mine in high school was reading, I think, The Sum of All Fears, maybe, because she had started dating a guy who was a big Tom Clancy fan, and she wanted to read it so they could have something to talk about, and she knew that I read those books, and she brought it to me. She's like, Jen, this is terrible. How can you read them? And I'm like, yeah, it's bad, but that's not the point. That's not why you read them. And, but yeah, the movies were fun, especially Hunt for Red October. Patriot Games was not as good a movie as Hunt for Red October, but it was definitely much better than the book, because the book was, I mean, Prince Charles is a character in the book. It's ridiculous. But when I was about 12 or 13 years old, that was genuinely my favorite book. Question number 17 is, have you ever read a book that's made you hungry, including cookbooks? And my answer to that is this series, What Did You Eat Yesterday?, which is cuisine manga. Every time I read the latest volume of this, it makes me want to cook, because that's just what cuisine manga does. It does its job. I always want to stir fry something. Question number 18 is, who is the person whose book advice you'll always take? And I can't think of one reviewer whose advice I would always take. I don't know, I always feel like any good reviewer gives you enough information to tell if you're going to enjoy something that they didn't enjoy, or if you won't enjoy something that they did. So I don't see it as taking their advice. Question number 19 is there a book outside of your usual comfort zone that you ended up loving? I read a lot of memoirs, although usually military memoirs, and I read a lot of comics, although usually genre comics. So Fun Home is my answer to that, which is a family memoir, primarily about the author's childhood and her relationship with her father. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this. It was recommended to me about 50,000 times, and I finally said, yeah, fine, I'll read it. Not expecting to enjoy it, but I did. I was not such a huge fan of the follow-up, Are You My Mother? But this one was very good. I think it's a musical now. And that, I believe, is the final question. I actually was just watching a bunch of new booktubers, so I'm going to grab a few of them from my notes, and I will link them down below, and I'm going to tag them. So thanks again to both Shannon and Waiting Moose for tagging me, and that's it for now. Ciao!